All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Tomboy Official. On this episode, actually, when I was recording my initial thoughts about the Super Time pilot, had this segment in there towards the end and accidentally trimmed out the original part about what I was saying about Super Time. So this is the section that was kind of my own perspectives regarding like some of the labels, like especially like gender related labels, some experiences I've had with that, as well as like sexuality labels with like, you know, how I identify, how others kind of view the way I present, maybe. Because I guess with identity, you know, you're verbalizing what your label is or what you prefer to be labeled, but the presentation doesn't always have to match that. So for myself, I know, you know, my presentation might sometimes, there's some stuff that's maybe like, if you think stereotypes may be obvious, and then there's other stuff that's not. Like, just like I mentioned coming up, you know, like, I don't think I was really raised around a lot of people, or I don't think I was really, you know, around a lot of people who like assumed I had a sexual identity that wasn't straight hetero, or completely like cis ideas. Like I've mentioned, you know, there weren't that many people who directly ever came up to me and expressed that they had these questions. And like I've mentioned before, you know, I'm quite a social person, so, you know, I've had plenty of my life interacting with different types of people in the cities and stuff pretty much all the time, other than when I temporarily choose isolation, or maybe like my senior year of high school, and maybe my first I mean, I always kind of had social circles, but they weren't maybe like, so when I was my junior and senior year of high school, I didn't really have like a lot of direct social circles at high school that I hung out with outside of school, but I did have people that I hung out with at school, like at school a little bit, not too much. I was, you know, I did have some kind of social issues during high school, just kind of not really being able to be like fully authentic, because I was at a smaller private school before where everyone knew everybody, so in a way I kind of thought I was the shit, you know, like not really, but like I could kind of tell that like I could pop between different social groups, and like there wasn't one group or one person who was ever like never wanting to talk to me or something. Like I could talk to pretty much everybody. It was a very small school, but I was, you know, pretty much anyone I wanted to talk to, I was able to talk to people. So when I went to a bigger high school, I wasn't really too social at the school. I tried to be, but yeah, I just didn't fit in, and I was studying so much too. Like I'd kind of rather spend my lunchtime studying, because I was like, I'm not really like easily vibing with people, and you know, I didn't really know how to socialize, because like, I was thrown in my junior year, so it's not like I even like grew up in the school or junior high with these people. I was just thrown in at a weird year, um, where people already had their relationships kind of established since like freshman year, and I already had relationships through church and the school I had previously gone to, with people who were still local, who didn't go out of town for school, who didn't go to like a boarding academy outside of the neighborhood, like the ones who stayed and went to public schools, or other private schools, but just like day schools. I was still involved with them, but I can't remember anybody ever questioning like my sexuality or anything. I remember, I've mentioned this before, but I remember being in like, what year was I? I remember there was this specific guy, Josh, so it must have been like high school, sometime during high school. I don't know. We were going to like laser tag, I remember that. And we were all as a group, and I guess maybe it was like a church or school activity, chaperoned, I guess. But I remember, because I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have hung around certain of the people who were there. Like, certain people I only saw like at actual scheduled events. So I remember, when I was walking into the girls' bathroom, one of the staff, she saw me going down the hallway, towards the women's, and she was like trying to like catch my attention and be like, hey, like, it's the wrong one. I think she kind of like didn't like chase, she wasn't like rude chasing after me or whatever, but she kind of like jogged, like kind of like, oh, like tapped my shoulder, like while I was like going into the door, and realized, when I turned around, she was like, oh, like you're a girl. And then this guy Josh, he was a skater, and like just kind of like, he was younger, a little bit obnoxious, but whatever. Like I saw him all the time anyways, with other people that I knew that used to skate, and he I remember he was the one who was kind of like overly cracking up laughing about it. And even like later on, like I don't know how much later on, but like it was at least weeks, multiple weeks, if not days, multiple weeks, probably even months, where he would be like, oh, what's that funny, like, remember, because I'd see him at least on Fridays, at our Friday night youth group Vespers thing. Like, I would see him there at least, because they'd be skating before and after that. So I remember seeing him all the time. I just can't remember if we were still going to school at the same school, but I would see him at least on Fridays, every Friday. But yeah, during that time, he was, I don't know, he just thought it was funny. I don't think he was really like directly teasing me. Like, he was, but it wasn't like a bullying kind of thing. Like, I never took it like that. I was just like, he's just obnoxious. And I don't remember ever like saying anything to him like, okay, stop mentioning that or whatever. I don't remember that. And then like, I remember when I was like, this was probably like 2003, maybe around sometime after 2003, maybe around 2005. I remember working with kids at the place where I used to go to school, but I was in college by this time, and either in my undergrad or like either in my community college or where I was going for my bachelor's program, when I was working for this school, I remember I used to have people kind of like kids. Usually it was like kids, I noticed kids of a certain age like kind of started being like, are you a girl or a boy, kind of thing. Like, and it was like constant, they were like constantly asking me this, are you a girl or a boy, are you a girl or a boy, are you a girl or a boy. Like, it wasn't like constant like that, but it was like, it wasn't like a one-time thing from one kid. It was like multiple kids on multiple occasions. We're not very clear about that. And, you know, some kids would be like, oh, like, because of your hair, you know, if they saw that I had like a little longer hair, or if they saw that I had, you know, some, like, they would just not really know. But I mean, I have a very feminine name, but they just kind of didn't really know. And I was one of the playground supervisors. I would teach computers at a certain point later on, K through 6. Yeah, and they would basically just come up to me and ask me those things. Like, I mean, it was valid, you know, and I would just be like, I'm a girl, you know. It wasn't really like, you know, it was annoying. It was a little like awkward, but it was like kids naturally ask that. And that was the only time, I think, when I was around a whole lot of kids all the time, that they would be asking me that all the time. And I was like in my 20s, and so I think they also knew I was younger. And you know, I would you know, I wouldn't dress like very femme, you know. I'd wear comfortable clothes, so I wasn't super dressed up. And I'd usually wear clothes because we were on the playground watching the kids, and a lot of times I'd play like soccer with them or basketball or push them on the swings, or like we'd be like engaged with the kids sometimes just to keep them out of trouble. It was like, yeah, it makes more sense to like just be engaged with these kids and play with them, you know, on the playground versus, you know, sit and watch them and have a whistle and be like blowing the whistle every time they do something wrong. Like, if you're actually like involved with them, like on the slides or playing with this group or playing with that group or whatever, there's usually less problems. And there were like 4 or 5 of us around in our 20s who were working the same job. So and then there were people older than us that were working there too, like in their 50s or 60s. And we were just kind of like the ones that were like actually actively playing with the kids. So they knew we were older, they knew that we had some kind of an authority, but they didn't treat us like they treated like the older staff who were like parents and grandparents. Like, they knew we were like college students and stuff. So they were a little less formal with us. So that was part of it. Another part of it was that, you know, they were playful, they were curious, and they like to point out, you know, they point out your differences and stuff. So yeah, but yeah, they would often like mention stuff about, you know, like if I was a boy or a girl. And I think just the combination of like, maybe I didn't really have like long hair. It wasn't like ultra short, but if I wasn't straightening it at all, it wasn't really long at all either. It, you know, my clothing style was definitely like I would wear jeans a lot back then, like jeans, Dickies, cargo pants, like that kind of Old Navy-ish looking style. Old Navy, yeah. Because I was working too. I wasn't trying to look like I just came out of the gym or just came from the beach or something. I would wear a little bit nice stuff, but it was like nice enough that you could still kind of like shoot the ball around and stuff. So I'd have like, you know, I didn't really wear shorts and like graphic tees too much. It was like if I wore t-shirts, it was like plain t-shirts, otherwise nicer shirts, and or like polos, and then like I said, like khaki jeans, that kind of, you know, like those kind of clothes, and just like sneakers. So there was nothing really like, oh, you look like you're I wasn't wearing a suit or a dress or anything like that. But also the clothes were kind of more like mask style fitted, and then loose though. I used to wear like a lot of looser clothing, and then yeah, so that was pretty consistent for like multiple years. I think I worked there 2 or 3 years, and the kids were pretty consistently asking me if I was a girl or a boy. And I remember once one of my outside friends came to like hang out with me, and, you know, I was working and I was getting off my shift in a few minutes, and she came back to like meet me, because she knew the school, because we were all part of the same church, and the church kind of owned the school, so we would actually be at the school sometimes too, like outside of, like on weekends or whatever, like we could hang out there, like whatever. But I remember once when she came up to look, to like wait for me to get off work, and it was like a few minutes, and then some of the kids were rushing up because they're like nosy, so they were like rushing up, like first graders and stuff, just to ask me like who my friend is and whatever. And I was like, yeah, we're gonna go hang out and like eat dinner or whatever. Like, I don't remember what I was telling them, but I would tell them what I would do. It wasn't like some secret thing. They were just kids, so I would tell them. I wasn't like hiding it. Like, it wasn't like I wasn't always having friends there, but they knew that me and the other people that I worked with, they knew we were friends. So yeah, there was that. And then yeah, we would kind of like talk to each other. Yeah, and just that specific time when this one kid came up to me, it was like, are you, like, when all the other kids were like, are you a girl or a boy kind of thing, and then he came up to me like after, because he was like one of those kids that was like, how there's some kids that are just like a little obnoxious and like to like keep the joke going or whatever, and they would come up and they'd be like, oh, like, are you a boy, or like he came up and like, are you a boy or a girl, and then he like, I guess he kind of like looked, like did like a once over kind of thing, like looking, and then was kind of like, oh yeah, you're a girl, like, because I guess I had this like fitted polo shirt on, and I guess he saw that I had like boobs, and he was like, oh, like, and they were definitely, like very small cup size back then, because I was a lot more athletic and had like very little body fat, so my body had like, I wasn't really curvy back then either, and so there was a lot of that kind of stuff, and they probably just saw me playing sports all the time with them, like to them, like, it's not really obvious that some female in their 20s is going to be playing sports with them all the time. Like, that wasn't like normal, that wasn't probably something that they normally saw. And there was another female coworker. She was kind of like tomboyish, but we grew up together, and she like, they didn't say the same stuff to her, but probably because she kind of had more like hips and longer hair and stuff like that, so they kind of knew. But like with me, it was like, I don't think I looked that femme, but I think it was probably one of the least femme looking times in my life. Just because I recall, yeah, it was probably one of the least femme looking times of my life because of my my build, my shape, my clothing, being athletic, being younger. So I didn't really look like an older woman, like an adult woman. I still looked like almost like a teenager. So I would get not really mistaken, like they didn't really know, but I don't think they ever misgendered me. I don't remember them ever saying like he, because I don't go by he, but I don't remember them ever saying he. So I think they knew, they just didn't say it. They just kind of were asking, kind of like a little to be annoying and a little just to hear me say it, and then a little bit kind of like, I think they were curious to kind of know, like, why am I looking the way that I do? I think that was more of the question, like, and there was no conversations really about it. And because it was a religious school, like, I kept that kind of stuff, like, I didn't really think to talk about it. I was just kind of like, all right, like, whatever, go away. But, I mean, they did it around, like, older people, too, and nobody, like, none of the staff ever said anything about it, like, none of the teachers or anything. And I was an adult, like, I was young, I was in my 20s, but I was an adult. And then like, yeah, there was just stuff like that would happen. But as far as like sexuality, I don't remember that many people directly asking me about that. I remember that just happened like a handful of times in my life. And maybe because people just don't ask each other that kind of thing too much. It's, but I had more of like people mistaking me for like a guy. That was kind of something that happened a little more often. Especially in my 20s, it happened a lot, but it's specifically because of that job. And because like I was, small stature, dressed like a skater boy. I was always hanging out with other boys, so I think I just kind of blended in. I just blended into the group. But yeah, there was all that. So this next part's kind of more so what I recorded yesterday. So when it comes to labels for me, I usually say gay or not straight, or I'll say queer. I had a friend who labeled me as pan. She was like, oh, so you're pan. And then I was like, I guess I said yes, because it's like, well, yeah, I kind of am. And then, so, I mean, I don't really have a lot of people asking me questions about myself like that, but I think one of the I guess one conversation I had with a friend of mine who maybe didn't fully know but is open to talking about my life. We were like catching up, a close friend I've known since we were like in kindergarten, like literally like children. Like we grew up together so young that our parents used to bathe us together. Like we were freaking young together, and our folks are still our parents are still friends. So we have all these labels, and I kind of noticed this not just about me but about others too. And there is this pressure when you're online to be like, oh, I have to sorry, you can tell I have a hard time talking about this kind of stuff. My mind just like stops focusing. That's kind of what's happening. Like I was talking this whole entire time, and then my mind just kind of just like is blanking out, so it's really hard for me to focus. So that's why I sound like I'm like not even trying to answer what I'm trying to say. But let me start over. We have all these labels, and sometimes I think for some people it kind of depends person to person and time to time in people's individual lives, choosing these labels. And something that I find interesting, because I do have hetero friends and I do have non-hetero friends, and I do have cis friends, non-cis friends, and the heteronormative culture is just it's such a challenge to try to pop out of. Like for myself, I feel like somehow I created this whole, I don't know if I manifested it or just focused toward it, and it just happened and blossomed. And I have noticed this this happen, with things that I think about. It's kind of like I've explained. I think I've explained before that I don't have, or usually, for a very long period of time, wasn't really around television a lot. I don't spend a lot of my time absorbing television content. I feel like it's too much information in my mind, and then I can't just like think freely and openly about stuff, and it just kind of stifles my creativity. It bombards my mind with too many things that aren't important. Like, most of the advertising is stuff I don't need to hear about. Your mesothelioma, I don't know how to even say it. Like, all those medications that are out for all kinds of stuff that I don't even have, and like all these other kind of advertisements for stuff coming up that I'm never gonna watch, and things that I'm never gonna buy. It's like, I don't care about any of this. So I usually, unless it's sports, I'm usually not trying to watch too much TV. Like, I'll watch some stuff, but usually, unless it's sports, I'm probably not watching it. And like I've mentioned before, I watch LA sports, and so I can literally sit a whole weekend and watch like multiple sports if I'm just watching LA teams alone. I do like watching hockey, even though I don't really fully follow it. But now that I have a TV at my family's house where I can watch sports, because my dad's got like every sport channel, I watch a lot of sports. When I feel like just watching something, that's something that I like, because I feel like it's motivational, watching people do their professional entertainment and athletic job. I find it really fascinating. And so I like to watch the Kings games. I like to watch the Lakers, RIP Dodgers, and I watch other teams too. Like Galaxy, LAFC. The game's actually going on right now. I hope they win, but I don't really know if they're gonna win the MLS Cup, because it's not over yet. And yeah, but other than sports, I feel like that's plenty of hours out of the week or month that I don't really want to watch too much more. And then, like, there's Netflix, there's YouTube, there's, just free streaming random stuff. There's enough to watch. But I feel like a lot of it is very just like this weird world that I almost have nothing to do with. Like, when I watch it, it's like so disconnected from my actual real life, where I'm just like, I don't see anything that's too relatable on mainstream TV, unless I'm watching like women's soccer or something, or like women's sports. I don't really see that kind of energy presentation of certain types of females. I mean, there are some shows where there's like the token gay queer person, or some queer series. Dude, shout out to the L Word coming back soon. Very, very freaking soon. Hell yeah. So I just, when I do watch stuff, it's like this complete, it feels like I'm watching some other world that I'm like not a part of. So what I was trying to say is, I somehow created this life for myself in San Diego, where almost everyone I associate with is LGBT or an ally. I mean, if I do know people who aren't allies, then I don't really know. Like, maybe I have coworkers who are prejudiced, but if they are, I've never known. There's some people that I've come across that I had some speculations that maybe they weren't comfortable, but I don't feel like they ever like directly were like mad at me or whatever, or prejudice against me. Like, I had some friends that, when we were getting to know each other like a few years back, it was a little like, okay, like I could kind of tell that they're not used to this, Yeah, it takes a while to get used to people. It really does, on all ends. So that's kind of all that it really was. But yeah, I definitely moved, and it took a while to develop a lot of relationships. And um I would say when I first, I mean, I'm not going to go back through my whole entire history, but I guess when I first started grad school, well, it was my second grad school technically, but when I first started this, what was going to be the PhD program in San Diego, I had a lot of my cohort, I guess people kind of assumed I was maybe straight, and that was probably one of the first times that I was talking more openly about dating, and even the grad school I was at before that. That's kind of when there were kind of deeper relationships forming with friends, allies, queer friends, but I wasn't really like out. I was just kind of like, I was always in this like stifled religious environment where there was really no way to even like test anything, or explore with anything. Like, it was kind of just not really, there was no like safe way to do that, coming home, living with my parents. And I don't really have the type of relationship with them where we're super open with each other about everything, but I also don't really like to lie about stuff. So I'll tell them where I go, kind of, but I kind of don't. Like, I've always been kind of like able to be vague when I needed to or wanted to. They've never been like too much up in my business. Like, a little bit they are, but I feel like if they are, they're not like grilling me like, where are you at, where are you going, who are you with, like, where were you, like, they know that I go to pride events. I've got a pride flag in my car. They're not stupid. You know what I mean? I'll put it that way. They're not stupid people at all. They're very intelligent, smart, try to practice acceptance as part of their religion. We just live completely different lives, and it's fine. But yeah, I was never really raised around like I don't know if I assumed I was asexual, but I feel like I was pretty much always almost treated like I'm asexual. Like, I was never like openly talking about sexual topics too much. There was always some like definitely gender stuff that was clearly I'm different. Usually I would excel at sports. Like, I wasn't like that good, but like, because I was mostly playing sports with female, people during like PE classes and stuff, and the majority of them were not interested in sports and athletics and like exercise and stuff like that. So they weren't like training. A lot of them weren't like training. Like, some of them were even like, they would be femme but still interested in like running and athletics and stuff like that, but they weren't really into the sports. And then there was like a small crew of us that were kind of more, I guess, the tomboyish types that would play sports, and we'd always hang out with the guys and be like playing sports with the guys. And so we were like a little more skilled, but it was only because we put more effort into doing it. Like, during recess and during lunch and during PE, we would actually play sports, as well as playing sports on the weekends. So we'd be playing sports at least 1 to almost 3 times, 4 times a week, and then you count like a sports league on Sundays. So if you compare that to people who never play sports, of course you're going to be a little bit better if you're playing that often. Even if you're not trying that hard, you're going to at least have more accuracy with like whatever, passing, shooting, whatever. Like, your speed, your stamina, you're going to have a little more. But yeah, like, I was never, the only thing that had like a femme impact on me was that I had to go to church a lot. And it's not like somebody was forcing me. It's just that I didn't really, I was raised in an environment where that's what we did. It was just part of the culture. Just like some families have a Sunday barbecue every Sunday, you know, and that's just what they do, you know, like without fail, they'll have a Friday dinner every Friday, you know, like it was just part of our family thing that we did, you know. We just were, you know, involved in church a lot, and so that's just what we did. And, you know, I dressed the part because I was in the environment. I never really knew, you know, I saw this one lady who would wear pants, like kind of like pantsuits, like business clothes, like dress slacks. I don't know what you call them, like women's pants, women's business attire type of pants. And she was like the first woman that I saw that wasn't wearing a lot of dresses and skirts, but like I started, like, I was like, well, if that's okay for her, then, you know, once I got into like choosing my own style kind of more in like college and stuff, that's when I started wearing like kind of like business attire type of clothing to church, because I was like, well, I can't just look a mess, you know, with like basketball shorts or like board shorts and like a baseball hat or something. Like I have to wear like something. And so that's what I would wear. I would wear like, you know, like the, you know, whatever you get in like the petite section business wear at like Target or Sears or JCPenney or Macy's or like whatever the heck. Kohl's, like those were the types of places Ross, Marshalls, those were the types of places I would shop at. I had like no interest, like really, I wasn't really too interested in clothing because I didn't really like it. So I was like, well, I don't really care about those types of clothes. But I did like other types of clothing. The kind of clothing that I liked was, you know, like Miller's Outpost, Pacific Sunwear that turned into PacSun. You know, I started getting into like kind of like skater looking fashion just because, you know, being raised by the beach and stuff. And but, you know, I'm saying all this background just to mention that, you know, there's a lot that I think when it comes to my own identity with stuff, like I can kind of see what was happening, but I was never like putting a label, you know. And it, you know, I don't think I really had people questioning my sexuality or anything. But I also never really, like, even with my close friends, I noticed they would talk about dating, they would talk about, you know, their love interests, their crushes, all this kind of stuff, and I was always kind of quiet, like, and if there was a guy that I was interested in, I might say something, like, did I think that this guy is maybe attractive, or, like, you know, if we had, like, certain types of formal dinner type things, you know. There were a couple times where I went with somebody, guys, and then there were some other times when, you know, there was a one guy who just totally, like, same day of the event was like, sorry, I can't go. And that just happened to be the same day that one of my close friends, you know, his parents were going to be working, and he lived in the neighborhood, and he was like, well, can my parents drop me off before they go to work? Can I catch a ride with you? And I remember we had a limo. Like, me and some other friends had pitched in for a limo. We were all going to meet at this other person's house and take pictures outside the limo. And so my other friends were expecting me to bring this other guy that we all kind of knew. And it just so happened that me and my friend were, you know, because we rode, like, my mom drove us to this place where we were taking pictures. My mom drove us there, and, you know, me and him, we weren't like a date or anything. We were just physically together in the environment, because of the rides and stuff, but we weren't like a couple or anything like that. Like, he was Muslim, not that was an issue, but I just think culturally he didn't really believe in dating, which I found out later. Like, I asked him about that, and we were talking about that, and he was kind of like, I'm not really gonna date, I'm just gonna get married kind of thing. And so I was like, okay, like, I didn't really know how that worked culturally. That was something that I never really asked too much about, and I'm not sure if that's something that I've ever really heard too much about. And then, getting older, seeing my other friends getting like into relationships, getting engaged, getting married, stuff like that. Not all of them, but some of them. And then some of them getting divorced or having breakups and all this other kind of stuff. Some of them having kids. There's just like a variety now of different scenarios. But, I kind of noticed, there's stuff that I just can take or leave. Like, I'm not like actively like working hard to try to like marry somebody. I'm not really actively working hard to try to like be in a serious dating, monogamous relationship. A lot of the reasons why I'm not really trying to do a lot of that stuff is because, I'm not really even living in the place where I want to live at. So it's kind of like, why would I, get involved with something when I'm not even trying to stay here? I'm 50% done with my class, and so by the end of this weekend, I don't want to put a number in my head. I'm thinking 65. It might be possible for me to push to close to 75 by the end of this coming week, especially with some days coming up, and then some more motivation, towards snowboarding. I think I might be able to kind of swing that, but yeah. And as far as, just my clothing styles, I wear what I want to wear, which, there's kind of a lot of themes to it, and I'll talk about that in a different episode. And then as far as, gender identity, I think, like, oh my gosh. So I think when I moved to San Diego in like the first year of my grad school there, one lady asked me about my sexuality, and she was just like, yeah, you have a lot of masculine energy. And I was like, I know, but I think I told her I was straight. And then, because I think I never really knew to say anything else. Like, I wasn't thinking it through. I was saying something, but I feel like other people knew. The reason why I feel like other people knew was because I realized they didn't treat me like they treated everybody else. Like I mentioned, when my friends would be talking about dating and stuff, I didn't really speak up a lot about, if there was anyone I was interested in. Like, most of the people were from church. But I socialized with plenty of people who didn't go to church and stuff too. And I never really was like telling them, what I was doing. I remember in high school, I like made up a whole person, which was weird, but I think it was mostly because I kind of knew I wasn't, it wasn't all of high school. It was like 1 year of high school, but like, I knew I wasn't really, not equal, but I wasn't like on the same, like, I knew I was kind of like behind in a way, not really behind, but not really doing things the way that other people were. And the reason for that was because I didn't really have an environment where I could do that. Like, I couldn't be dating church kids in church while I was a kid, like, that wasn't like a thing you could do. Like, I didn't drive. I was raised in LA. I wasn't driving before I was like in high school. Like, I was practicing since I was like 14, trying to get a learner's permit or whatever, but I wasn't like, like, I was able to take the bus and that kind of stuff. Like, we were allowed to like go places without my parents. I think the furthest I would probably go would be like up by LAX or like Venice Beach, Santa Monica area. And then, or up to Hollywood, or, maybe down to Long Beach. So probably that distance, on bus routes. I think mostly, though, the distance would be like Venice Beach, Santa Monica, and then south would be like Long Beach. Like, I didn't really go too far. Because you still have to ride the bus back, you know. Um, so I wasn't really going like super far, but on a bus, those are pretty far distances, honestly. And I was raised kind of in the middle of there. Um, and so, yeah, I was, you know, just never really fully able to really do too much of like, you know, exploring what I was even interested in. I don't remember having any like heavy crushes when I was like, I don't know what age. Like I did have crushes on people, but it wasn't like, ooh, I have a crush on my friend in my class or whatever. Like there was never really much of that. Like, you know, the girls I had in my classes, I wasn't really interested in any of them. I wasn't interested in any of my teachers. I wasn't interested in any of the women at my church. I think in sports league there might have been a couple people who I remember being like, okay, they're like some aunts of some of my teammates or something that like were queer presenting people with like, you know, kind of like the short spiked haircut and like kind of mask presenting, you know. I had a couple people in my life that I was like, all right, like I kind of like that. And like I mentioned, like I think third grade was when I first went to this play where I saw Peter Pan, and there was a girl playing Peter Pan, and I was like totally crushing on that girl. But I guess ever since third grade, I just kind of just was like, okay, that was something that I like. Like I did kind of know that I liked mask type of women, but outside of that, I didn't know if it was something I would ever pursue. And then as far as like guys, I was kind of like, I was around so many guys, but there was a certain point where I feel like they stopped, you know, having like deeper emotional connections, and they mostly just wanted to just like play sports all the time. They never wanted to like sit still and talk and like hang out and stuff. And so that's when I started hanging out with the non-sporty kind of guys that were kind of more like artistic and weren't really into athletics and just like to read and talk about their feelings and just hang out and stuff. So I kind of saw them dating and stuff, and saw girls being kind of interested in them sometimes. But I was never really interested in a lot of people. Like there were some friends that I was like, some people that I knew that I was like, okay, like I could tell who I thought was maybe more attractive than others, or there were certain things I liked about their personalities, but none of it was too deep. So yeah, people kind of just treated me like I was like an asexual person. There wasn't a lot of like sexualizing conversation, or even amongst my friends, like people didn't really ask, you know, are you dating anybody? Are you in a relationship? Like nobody really asked. Everybody just let me do whatever. Like on occasion when I'd see cousins, like every few years or so, they'd be like, oh, like you dating anybody, like, or whatever. But like outside of that, like really, like my parents were never open asking that kind of stuff too much. My siblings weren't. People at church really couldn't care less. I just kind of roamed the earth as like this person that was just like nobody ever really tried to do too much to approach. I mean, I definitely dated people, but it was kind of like DL kind of dating, I guess. And you know, I wasn't dating people from church. I was dating people like that I knew from like, you know, undergrad, grad school. That's kind of mostly when I was dating, was like probably later in my 20s, because I feel like I had like enough distance then from like the church eyes, I guess. Like I had friends that were just completely not connected with anybody unless I would have invited them to be like, hey, you know, come over, you know, and meet my other friends over here. Like they didn't have anybody's numbers. They weren't on each other's social media. There was none of that. And I think that's when I started getting more comfortable, where I was like, okay, these people aren't connected. Because before that, even when I was at community college, I had a lot of church friends who went to the same community college, and we still had the social circles, and then, just trying to even explain all this is just like a lot. But um that's kind of how things looked for me. Like, I wasn't really like people are when they're like 14, 15, 16 years old, like dating and stuff. Like, I wasn't really dating that young, outside of like the school provided types of banquets and that kind of thing. I didn't really go to them. And there were some, I had some, so basically I had some religious friends that went to the Spanish service church in another part of the city. And like I've mentioned before, a lot of these different churches of the same denomination would connect by, sports or different kind of events. And some of us went to the same religious school, so there was a lot of overlap of people that went to different churches. And once we got a little older in high school, we could like take the bus over to other parts of the city and start mingling with these other kids. So I knew a lot of Spanish speaking Mexican, immigrant families who had kids, that a lot of the Spanish speaking religious kids went to this Spanish speaking church in LA, of this denomination. And a lot, I would go, on occasion I went to visit their church, but it was more so because I had friends there. So I would go visit their church. We had some sleepovers and would hang out and wake up and go to soccer on Sunday mornings. And, we have movie nights, and, we kind of hang out and socialize with each other. And, I think those were some of the people that when I had like banquets to go to and stuff, there were a couple guys from that church, that I would just, we were kind of homies, but whatever. And I would just be like, yo, you want to come with me to this like banquet thing I got going on? And one of the guys, I remember he was in ROTC, so he'd always wear like his little like military looking uniform and stuff. And like, so he was usually the guy that I would take places. But, I wasn't like into him. Like I thought he was a good looking guy. Like, he was attractive, but I wasn't like into him. I wasn't trying to date him or anything like that. But we went on those types of dates. Like, like there was like a formal aspect of like, you got to buy the clothes and, get the tickets and show up and stuff. And like, it was like formal events. I think one of them was like a boat ride thing. I don't remember. Like, there was a lot of stuff that we did that I just don't remember. But, I always knew I was just never into that kind of stuff. I was just like, fine, I'll go because my friends are talking about it. But, so I think people saw me do that. Like, I was kind of playing by the rules, but I wasn't like into it. And I don't think anybody really cared if I was into it or not. But like, my folks never really hounded me on any of it because, the guys were from like, the same religious church, and like they kind of knew maybe some of their family members or people who knew their family members, and so they weren't too concerned. They didn't really tell me anything about it. And yeah, I mean, I've kind of forgotten about all that stuff. Like, none of it was really like too deep. But I do notice, yeah, that, usually around high school age and stuff, you do have people kind of talking more about, like, their experimentation and all that kind of stuff. Like, I wasn't really doing, too much of anything during that time in my life. I was just kind of, I was kind of just like doing my own thing, really. Like, I don't know if it bothered me. Like, I really don't know. Like, I don't remember being like, oh, like, I wish I liked boys. I wish I was like boy crazy or whatever. Like, I don't remember. Like, in my head, I really just thought that I just wasn't Oh, it'll come later when I'm like in college or like whatever. I'll meet somebody that I'll want to marry, or I was trying to follow this narrative that I was being taught, that like you'll go to college and you'll meet a guy and you'll want to settle down and you'll get your job and you'll date and want to get married and stuff, and I was just like, maybe it'll happen. And the funny thing is, like, people who know me, it's like I'm one of the most social people. um as far as like groups of people, I don't, like I mentioned, like I'm in a very isolated time period of my life right now, but I do have people where if I really wanted to make plans, I could call them up right now and make plans. Like it might not be today, if they might be busy, but I could make plans for later in the week or whatever. I just haven't been reaching out. I'm working on a bunch of other stuff, and I just haven't been reaching out, honestly. And it's different. It's different for me. It's not something I'm used to, but I'm getting used to it. But yeah, it's just been interesting. Like, my walk in life with dating and all that has just been interesting, just because people treat me like, I guess maybe they don't know what to think. And I'm not like an overly sexualized person. Like, with my friends, I joke about stuff. Like, we make stupid, like, jokes and stuff, but I'm not really, I've never really had this, like, vision of, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, like, get married and have kids and, like, do all this kind of stuff. Like, I've never really, like, envisioned it, or, I mean, I say I'm not against it, but I'm not, like, actively moving towards it. And it's just, it's not really bad. It's just kind of like, I think I just never thought to think of, okay, what is going on? Like, I always knew that there was something different, but I never was really, like, talking about it with people. And I think I've mentioned before in previous episodes, when I was, like, going through this human sexuality course in my first grad school experience in LA, when I was getting a master's, I was in this human sexuality class with people who were my cohort and friends at that point. And because we'd been together, for like at least a year or so by that point in our cohort. And that was probably the first, it wasn't like sex ed, like I knew about sex before then, but like it was probably the first open conversation that I'd heard about just people talking about sexual topics in a professional way, or in a non-strange, like, religious kind of perspective of don't do any of this because it's wrong, or from a perspective of some kind of political agenda, or from some other kind of perspective of any kind of perspective. Just we basically chose topics, we about human sexuality, and we gave a presentation on those topics, and we would read, and we would watch videos in class, and we would write a weekly reflection page that we would turn in. And a lot of that, was me writing about sexuality. And it's interesting that my paper, like my final paper, was longer than everybody else's. And I almost felt like I was like, almost like I was proud of that paper. Like, I was into that class. I was like, it was probably one of my favorite classes. I was into that class, and I remember, it was probably, oh man, it was probably, I don't even know. It was probably, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, 2031, 2032, 2033, 2034, 2035, 2036, 2037, 2038, 2039, 2040, 2041, 2042, 2043, 2044, 2045, 2046, 2047, 2048, 2049, 2050, 2051, 2052, 2053, 2054, 2055, 2056, 2057, 2058, 2059, 2060, 2061, 2062, 2063, 2064, 2065, 2066, 2067, 2068, 2069, 2070, 2071, 2072, 2073, 2074, 2075, 2076, 2077, 2078, 2079, 2080, 2081, 2082, 2083, 2084, 2085, 2086, 2087, 2088, 2089, 2090, 2091, 2092, 2093, 2094, 2095, 2096, 2097, 2098, 2099, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, I don't really know. Like, I was I was writing I was writing like about my um like, I guess, experiences or thoughts, or just diving into different topics, and I remember telling one of my cohort friends, because we would like text each other before stuff was due, because sometimes they would tell us write a paper and they would never tell us how long. So usually our papers were like, you usually had to write over 10 pages, like, you know um you usually weren't going to get a good grade if you wrote like a 5-page paper or a 7-page paper. It was like, it usually 10 is usually the minimum. And so with 10 being the minimum, usually people went over 10. I would usually shoot to write my papers between 15 and 20 pages. For most classes, that was usually what I would shoot for. Because it's kind of hard when people tell you can't write, you can't have, they don't tell you how many pages to write. Like in undergrad, you usually know how many pages to write, like they tell you, but this one they would never really, maybe they would tell us, but I don't remember them ever really telling us. For this class specifically, we didn't have like a page limit or a page, any kind of explanation. So I remember I was just writing, because I was like, yeah, I had a lot to say, not necessarily because I'd been doing a whole lot of stuff, but I just had a lot of ideas and thoughts about these topics, and so I remember writing my paper, my friend being like, or one of my cohort friends being like, what did you write about, or how long is your paper? And I was like, it's like 30 pages, And she was like, mine, like, I was struggling to get like 7 or something like that. And I was like, oh, shoot. Like, and then, I kind of thought it was between like me and her. I didn't really think much of it. And then I remember we would get to classes early a little bit. And I remember her mentioning like she said it like loud enough that everybody could hear, like, yeah, like her paper was like 30 pages or like whatever. It was kind of like almost like not surprised or shocked, or like, I took it more like, not like purposeful shaming, but I feel like she was like maybe shocked or surprised, maybe impressed. I don't know what her opinion was, because I didn't think she even remembered. Like, we would always talk about, like, there were a lot of us, and we would talk about schoolwork a little bit on a regular basis. And so, it wasn't uncommon to just run stuff by your other cohort members, like, hey, what did you do for this? Or like, did you finish this yet? Or like, I know this is due Friday, but have you started on it yet? Or like, whatever, it would be common that we would like be working on our own separate stuff and just kind of like chat with each other online and be like, hey, what are you doing this or whatever. And so that was one of those experiences where we were doing that, and like, but I never expected her to like come into the class and like tell everybody. This was like before class even started one day, and like I was like, shoot, like, because I remember after we had talked about it before the class, I remember, okay, well, she wrote less, so I felt the pressure to narrow mine down, so I started taking certain stuff out. And then when she said like how long my paper was, I was like, well, I took some of the stuff out, so it's like less now, But I kind of felt kind of weird how she kind of remembered enough to like mention it, because usually when people start talking about their schoolwork or whatever, say for example, if it's like a Friday or Saturday or Sunday and your class together is on Monday, and everyone's working on assignments and stuff, and someone hits you up on like a Friday, like, hey, like, are you done researching for this yet? Like, how long did it take you or whatever? And then you say like, oh, it took me like 6 hours or whatever. And then usually when you come into class on Monday, nobody's going to remember what, like, oh yeah, you took that long, like nobody's really going to say, unless it seems like you did something, like you have like a skill, I guess. Like, like say if everyone else is like, I did the stats, write up. I did the whole assignment, and my report took me like if everyone else is saying it took them 2 whole weekend days to do, and then one other person's like, yeah, I did mine in like 2 hours, of course they're gonna be like, well, you did yours in like 2 hours. Like, so it was kind of like, I couldn't tell if it was that kind of thing where she was like, wow, I can't believe you wrote that much, or like, oh, because this is a human sexuality class, I can't believe you wrote that much, like that it was like a judgmental thing, or was it like, oh, like you have a writing skill, and so, I'm building you up with this, or was it more like you must have had a lot of sex in your life to be writing 30 pages kind of thing, and that's kind of weird. And I wasn't like, that wasn't the case. Like, it wasn't, I don't remember what the paper was about, but it wasn't about like, write your direct sexual experience. It was more like, what are your thoughts on it? Kind of more like within your culture, how can you see it from other cultural perspectives? And that's the kind of stuff I like to write about. So, just the prompts alone, there were multiple prompts too. It was like a whole outline worth of prompts, and so I spent a couple pages on each one, so by the time I was done, I had like a couple pages written on each topic, and it was like 30 something pages. And so I didn't see that as excessive, because I had a lot to say, and I had a lot of ideas and opinions, and I also didn't really grow up with a space to talk about that specific type of stuff. But one thing I can say is that I did grow up with an open space to talk about ideas. Like, growing up in a church where we had regular, I wouldn't even call them Bible studies. They were more like religious discussions, because we would have Bible studies. We would have different types of study and social type of interactions that were kind of facilitated, and then you'd have free time before and total freedom after. But so it was common to get there early. There'd usually be some food, snacks or something, and then we'd sit and talk. So if it was a Bible study type of thing, we would talk about the Bible or some type of movie that was like, we'd even do stuff as fun as like Bible movies, or movies that are like about like some religious person. Like, I don't know if that movie is called like A Walk to Remember or whatever, like movies like that where they're like, oh, like they prayed to Jesus. It's like some modern movie or something about religion, and then, or even other religions, and we either talk about it or not, or we just have other just topics about like political topics like abortion, or topics like I don't know, like gun control, or it wasn't like we were completely like, just sitting in the Bible all day. Like, we would talk about things that were kind of important things. Some of it was very relatable, and some of it was just not at all relatable. Like, we talk about social issues, about like bullying, or about peer pressure with drugs, or of course they were trying to like form our ideas, but we had a lot of, there was usually one youth pastor or collegiate pastor facilitating the group, but then the rest of us were just like talking, and it felt like a safe space. Like, and I spoke up a lot. I had a lot to say, but I don't know if I was ever really like there were some people I argued with a little, like we would debate a little bit, but I think that really helped me to kind of be open. If you think about being young and doing that for like probably at least 1 to 4 times a week, we would do that kind of discussion with different types of people, different types of groups, depending on the day, depending on the event. So it's not like sexual topics never came up, but it was never like too helpful or useful of a conversation. It was more like, you probably shouldn't do it, because if you're really a Christian, you need to be married first. And we all knew back then, at least like in the 90s and early 2000s, everyone was like, I don't think gay marriage was even legal anywhere that I knew of. So, we weren't talking about gay marriage even at that point. And so it wasn't really even a thing that would come up when I was growing up. And so we just never talked about it. And so I just didn't have a lot of spaces to really talk about that kind of stuff. So I think that experience in grad school was one of the earlier times I remember having a lot of discussion about those types of topics. But it was, of course, in a professional setting because we're in grad school, we're in class, so we'd be giving presentations and stuff. Like, but it was a whole course. It was really cool. And then, but yeah, even then, I was coming from like a very straight perspective. Like, I never had challenged much. Like, I don't think I challenged it much until my first job. It was my second practicum. So it was my third year in San Diego. I started kind of having an interest at somebody at work. And that's when I was like, okay. Like, it was somebody who was my age, but she was a married woman. So in my mind, I was like, I don't know how, like, when she first started working, because I was there before her, and I was like, she's so cool, you know, and like, and when, you know, I knew she was gay, but, you know, we had like those introductions, like, you know, after people start, but you have the whole like first full staff meeting where you have everybody there, and we were all talking, introducing ourselves more, and like just talking about our weekend, whatever, kind of go around the table. And she would say, you know, this lady was like, yeah, I'm gay and like married and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, whoa, that's so cool. You know, I think she was the first openly gay lesbian that I ever knew. And I was into her, but I was like, dude, but she's married too. And so I kind of stayed away. And I had another gay coworker guy, who we were kind of friendly at work. He eventually quit. Like, that was the first time I think I was like, I mean, grad school too. But those were like the first times when I was like around a whole lot more queer people in a more maybe professional setting, where it was just like, we're just friends and they just happen to be gay and we work together or go to classes together or whatever. Like, but you know, we would be able to talk to each other and stuff. But I wasn't really like out. And I remember actively ignoring like, I would hear her coming down the hall and I would literally walk. Like, there were these paths in the hall. Like, there were two hall, if you think of like an H shape, so you could walk down one hall all the way from the back to the front, or another hall all the way from the back to the front, and then there was this like connecting hallway that like connected both of those two hallways. So it was like an H shape. And I remember sometimes I'd hear her coming down one hall and I'd cut through like the middle of that like H to go over to the other hallway, so I didn't have to like run into her or say hi to her or be around where she's at. Like, I would even avoid saying hi to her or bye to her or like anything. I was like, I don't want to talk to her, just because I would get so nervous. I was like, I didn't even know what to say. And I remember like once I was like copying something and her office was like in that same space where I was copying, and she comes out of her office. I was like, okay, good, she's in her office. And so I went and copied some stuff, and I was like, good, she's in her office. And otherwise I was not going to copy anything there. And then I remember while I was copying, I was like really focused on the copying, and she comes up like behind me like, hey, you know, and like starts talking, and like she would always compliment like my shirts and my pants and like, you know, stuff like that. And I was just kind of like, all right, like she kind of likes my style that I'm going for. And I was kind of like, you know, slightly little by little kind of not really improving my style, but dressing more towards how I wanted to dress. Trying out different things. And, you know, it was nice when she kind of told me that she liked what I was wearing. I was like, awesome, you know. But she probably knew. She was probably like, yeah, you're gay as fuck, that's why you're wearing that. But like, she was cool. She was always cool to me, but we never got a lot of time to talk because we were working so hard. But it was just, I was like definitely into her. And then there was another close friend that we had a thing, and then there were some other things going on this was like before I met most of my queer friends. There was just a lot going on before that, even, so that once I kind of knew these people, that's when I started hanging out in, like, gay clubs all the time and stuff, and bars, and just that kind of thing. It was really enjoyable. But yeah, like, all of that is the type of stuff that I feel like kind of goes into the label. And it's like, when I think about it, it's like who I'm with, who I'm around, who I'm spending time with, that kind of shapes more so, the labels of things that I would maybe use. Now, something interesting that I'll go into in another episode maybe is that, I've never really addressed too much of the gender stuff. Like, one date that I went on with a trans guy, he, because I guess on my dating profile I put queer, and he was like, well, are you like gender queer, or like sexuality? And I was kind of trying to answer, and I kind of noticed I didn't really know how I wanted to respond to that. I was kind of like, yeah, I'm like, like, I just kind of described, like, well, with clothing there can be some certain things that come up, or different kind of stuff, but there was still a lot I just didn't have the words to, like, explain and describe. So I don't know, I feel like to my ally friends who are straight people, like, they seem to be pretty fascinated. Sometimes they're just like, whoa, like, what's up? But to other people, I don't really know. But yeah, that's kind of like where things stand on my end with, like, labels. It's not always the easiest of things to be like, oh, like, yeah. It's not like like, I try not to stress about it too much. Like, I would say the only place where I really might stress about it too much is, like, when I feel like there's, like, potential for judgment to be coming my way. Then I'll get more hesitant to either talk about it, or be open about it, or expressive about it, or anything. I'll usually just leave it alone and just be like, we're not going to touch that topic. And so, yeah, but so that's where I'm at with things. And yes, with that, thank you for listening.